Wouldn't it be nice?
Well,
There was that sentiment for that time. It was like pre 2008
it's
where
all
that
right. It's
needed
just
to be
like,
said. It
well, it's
needed
all
to be
right
said. It's just like it's just all right. But now it sort of feels like you're not even allowed
to say it's
to
all right.
feel that way because there's just so many things that are so obviously messed up. You can't. There, I feel like there's a real hunger for a salve over the zeitgeist to say, let's just if you can be happy, be happy. But it doesn't seem allowed right now. I don't know.
Well,
That's
I
how it
feel
feels
like
around here.
art answers to the sort of the things you can't say. They still do get expressed in art. If people are feeling them, the zeitgeist, it comes out. So there'd be some kind of like genre of music that's just or just like something like garage music or electronic party raves in garages or something. There were those answers to
Something
the
involving garages. It's
exactly.
something. Well, it hasn't gone through the corporate machine yet. That's what the garage thing implies. It's
But
like when you're
also,
saying the zeitgeist, it's like coming up from the bottom. People need to feel okay, so that will come up out of the garages.
I guess so. It's the corporate machine, but there's also the sort of social media machine and the pressure that puts on everybody to conform in a certain way and not get a little bit too out of step in a certain way. But I also think the sweaty garage dancing maybe it can be an answer to that. Although then
Sweaty garage dancing. I've never actually
I haven't either,
been a part of that or
but I have
witnessed
an
it
image.
even.
I could picture it.
It's not a hard thing to imagine, but I don't know that. I
No, I've
wonder
never.
if it exists.
Yeah. Well, I think someone was
Probably.
doing it somewhere.
Somebody sweating. So groups of people are sweating in garages. Well, it's also COVID makes that seem like the before times. Just the imagining, just like people dancing and is in a garage and getting sweaty all together. That seems like wow.
Seems
I mean, did
impossible to
that like
imagine,
not
but
happen
I
in
think
the last 2 years?
no, well, I don't know. Maybe it did, but I think that kind of thing will happen once everyone
Yeah.
is like enough, sort of like, okay, things are back to normal. Then I feel like the needle is gonna just slam to the other side, where they're just gonna go woodstocking out.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Does that sound good to you?
Sort
Well,
of. I mean,
woodstocking out
I
is.
could have used a different term than woodstock.
I feel like
What
the
sounds
last.
really good to me is just like hanging out in a warm living room
Yeah,
and chatting. That sounds great with a bunch of people.
that's as Woodstock as I get.
That's true, actually. Fully
You
true.
could tell. You could tell maybe just by looking at us that I may be more. I don't know. That's terrible. I don't want to. But yeah, like
I'm more of a party animal. I'm more,
I'm not at all. Of course not. I'm more like weirdo. But what was I gonna say about that? That the last time before Omicron, it really seemed like we were getting boosters, and it was just like, okay,
Was that before Delta
this is
too, right? Before Delta,
no. I think that the boosters was during Delta.
during Delta. But you were
Yeah,
starting to feel,
because
anyway, whatever it was, you were starting to feel a little more free again.
yeah, and it's sort of that was the second time because the first time I started to feel like it was like maybe the sun was coming out and we'd go back and we'd be able to hang out with people again it was before Delta, and then it was like and I got my vaccination and I was just like, let's the sunshine, and then that got slammed, and then I got the booster and the numbers were going down and it was like, okay, and now it really feels like the numbers are actually going down, but I'm just like, I don't trust it.
Fool me once, you fool me twice.
What was that?
Fool me, you can't get fooled again.
Yeah.
Funny. I had a moment this week where it was one of those very quick flashing moments. It was very fleeting, but it was very warming, where I was like, oh, it's all
Fleeting
possible.
and warming. Nice. Tell
It's
me
all
more.
possible. I was sitting on the front stoop of my house, and it was in the warmth, and I don't know, feeling good about some phone call we had or something, and I was just like, oh yeah, there's opportunities in this world, and they're there to be grasped, and we, I've got a good foundation to build on, and yeah, I'm gonna be able to make this move. And it, it just was like, we've talked about that before, that feeling where sometimes it's just like it opens up and you're like, oh, yeah, it's not that hard, I can do this. And then that shuts and it's hard to even see it at all through the fog. But and then sometimes we'll playfully call that grandiosity, and maybe that moment was grandiosity, but also that maybe that moment was truth. And then we protect ourselves by calling it grandiosity, or once it seems far or hard to reach, it seems like it was grandiosity. But anyway, it was wonderful. I was like welcoming back an old friend who hasn't visited in a while and been like, oh yeah, it's
Well,
possible.
that's really interesting, that the concept of grandiosity in this context, because when you're sitting there and the sun is out, isn't that all? Is it is the grandiosity that something that is not here is possible, or is the mountaintop actually that moment, like of feeling like everything's okay? Not so much that everything's going to be okay, but that everything is okay. I mean, like, when I think of grandiosity, I think of you get the scratch off tickets, like my number's gonna come and then I'm gonna get $1 million and then I'm gonna be able to solve all my problems, versus the feeling that, I mean, when you were telling that, I was relating to this feeling sometimes where there's this striving, and then there's this break from the striving where it's just like, okay, recognizing the abundance that you have and feeling like this is okay. And if that doesn't seem grandiose, but maybe that's not what you're saying. But
Well, I think like
does that make any sense?
yeah, if I were to say I'm pursuing my dream and it's to be the next mega pop star, pretty much the next Ariana Grande, you'd be like, that's nice.
Best of luck.
Best. Hats off to you. But I feel that silly sometimes if people are like, if I admit, well, I'm working on this TV pilot, and if they're like, what's the hope there? What's the play? And if I can actually get myself to say it, sometimes I'll just defer to protect myself. But if I can get myself to say it, then I'll feel almost like I just said I want to be the next Ariana Grande.
Yeah.
And so how do you gauge in your head how much is like, one of those sides is grandiosity, and maybe the other one is too. At least you feel it sometimes. But then you could also sort of, you could write your sober pros and cons list and say, well, this one actually is not impossible, this dream you're pursuing, but still feels just as silly.
Well, I think about this subject a lot, and oftentimes if I'm watching a movie or something and I look at the people that are listed, like there'll be some show that'll be very impressive. And I'll be like, wow, this is just really quality work was put into this. And I'll look in the the names that they show of the people that were involved, and there'll be writers. And I think there are so many writers in this that I've never heard of that aren't in this sort of rarefied name recognition of Ariana Grande, that I feel like those people rode the lightning to the point of doing this. They're doing this, and that would feel to me very that's the level of grandiosity, of course, from where I'm sitting now. But once I got there, I'd probably be like, but I really want to be Ariana Grande. But it seems like, if you actually wrote a movie and we're one of the 6 co-writers for a big movie, and then nobody remembers your name. Nobody, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't have your name remembered, but it doesn't seem, and so I guess it just doesn't seem that impossible, because people have different interests, and so it's just like getting good at something is not everybody wants to do the same thing. So if you want to be a screenwriter, sure, there are thousands of people who try and don't make it, but it doesn't seem silly at all. In fact, it seems really important, I think, for everybody. If you have an inclination that you want to be writing a sci-fi movie, to freaking go for it. Do it. Like it feels like imperative. Like if you have this inclination that you want to do sci-fi and write movies, do it. Freaking do it. Like that feels really important. And how close you'll get to realizing your vision is a question mark. But the question that comes up for me sometimes is, should I do it? Like if I have this inclination, at what point do I look at the evidence of my lack of skill and say, the jury's in, you didn't make the cut, just stop.
Right.
And whereas I think that the question of should I do it should be, the answer is yes, you should do it.
Yeah, I've been wondering about this exact thing because I'm sort of prepping. I've got a list of potential interviewees for this podcast idea, and I've been looking through them, and mostly sort of like I have a sense of what feels like a good fit and what doesn't. But I've been entertaining this very idea because there's sometimes I come across someone, I'm like, should you have failed out by now? Like you can never quite. I know that's a crappy thing to say.
What does that even mean? But yeah.
And I also think like part of my mission is to like help people get their creative courage. In fact, that's why I'm having this sort of question, because I sort of am feeling like what's exciting about the show is the idea of saying, yeah, like be creative in the world. Like the world needs more people's creativity. But then that sounds amazing. And it's great when you're working with someone who's obviously fabulous. But then when you're sort of like looking at someone who you're like not sure if they're fabulous or actually kind of mediocre, and especially if they're putting themselves out there as a creative person in the world, and you're like, well, let's see the evidence here. Then I'm sort of like, is that message a disservice? Which I know that sounds like a jerk thing to say, but it's sort of like...
No, I know what you mean. Yeah. But I do think that it's the wrong... I do think it's the wrong energy because I think it's wrong.
Yeah, it is the wrong energy.
No, but because
what's at least it's downer energy for sure. Like it's much
downer energy, and also it's discouraging energy. And I think we all have particular sensitivity to certain failings, right? And so we can recognize things that people are doing that's wrong. That first of all, not everybody's going to recognize. Like there are times where. I mean, when I went to acting school and there were actors that we thought were brilliant and there were actors that we thought were the worst. And then we would talk to other people, and some people would just think that the actors that we thought were terrible. They're like, oh, I really like that person. Yeah. And it's just like, so your particular, that might be an intelligence that you have, a critical intelligence where you could say, well, no, this is a false thing that they're doing. You might be right about that shortcoming. But that shortcoming, could be worked through if the person travels with serious intent, and especially if they travel in an encouraging atmosphere. And I think that this whole idea of letting your freak flag fly needs to be applied to people's creativity. People need to be like, yeah, I'm not Ariana Grande. Like, I can't hit those notes, and yet there's still some value. Like, you're compelled to put something into the world because you sense that there's some value that needs to be unearthed and shared. And you're going to bring all kinds of flaws to the table. But the more of an environment that we can have of, yeah, we're human, we're not polished, fake. I mean, honestly, like Ariana Grande, I don't know really anything about her, but the image I get in my mind is sort of like a very polished, very professionally manicured personality.
Why are we pooping on Ariana Grande all of a sudden?
Well, I think we're holding her up as an example of someone who's great. I mean, I think I've heard her sing sometimes, and she's clearly got
she's great. She also seems like a pretty decent person. Well, I know that's not your point. Look, no, I just have to defend Ariana right here.
Against these vicious attacks.
Sort of like a friend from having watched The Voice.
Oh, is she on The Voice?
She's on The Voice, yeah. The latest season. And she seemed like, I started out kind of skeptical, and then she kind of won me over. She seems like a quality person. Or she plays that really effectively on TV. So why do you hate Ariana Grande? I don't understand. What has she ever done to you?
I think that I do think that the era of I hope that the era of entertainers being so rarefied is sort of morphing into, because it becomes this sort of monoculture. You either drink Coke or you drink Pepsi, or
Well,
you,
but
if
there's
you're
quite
really
a
weird, you
range of
drink RC.
entertainers. I don't know. I mean, I think some of the biggest rarefied entertainers are the weirdest, and they have been for decades. You know, I mean, Prince didn't fit any molds, and a lot of the pop stars today don't fit mold. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
it is a mold,
part of what makes you cool, is that you do let your freak flag fly, and then you've got just the right mixture, and then people go for it. You know,
right?
I mean, the thing is, like, go for it.
Well, it's because this is ultimately, I think, what I think is needed is two things. It's the letting the freak flag fly. And Prince, for example, I don't know so much about his story either, but somehow it seems assured that there was enough of a community. Maybe there was only 6 people around him. Maybe there was at some point hundreds, but at some point there was a nest of people who encouraged him to let his freak flag fly in a way that he could develop it to just perfection. And so really what's needed is exactly, I think, what you're doing, which is, as much as we need individuals to let their freak flag fly, what we need even more is community building that provides these nests for more people to let their freak flags fly, and to encourage and to see what's great, and to sort of like help highlight the good stuff so that the bad stuff starts to fade into the blur. The community building. I mean, that's what we need. We need more communities, and I feel like what you're doing in your show is setting up another community that will help people blossom.
I'm excited about that, but you know, there is this thing that I've been thinking about a little bit, which is, you know, I mean, being creative is more fun than anything else, right? So you could imagine a utopian society where everyone has tapped into their creativity and everyone's going around dancing and spouting poetry, and meanwhile the fruit is rotting on the trees because there's no one who would rather pick the fruit off the trees so that you can eat than write poetry about the fruit on the tree. And so, you know, that's an extreme example,
but honestly, I know that fear is out there. That is this thing. It's like,
no, it's not a fear. It's not a fear, but it is sort of like
an excuse to discourage people. I think.
Well,
it's just like, look, you suck, so you should get it. You should start picking the fruit, even though you hate it. Because the fact is you that,
could see it as an excuse to
picking fruit.
Yeah. Okay.
Not everybody.
I guess the question. I'm not trying to be like, you know, it's not trying to.
You're like representing the squash culture.
I'm not trying to have like, it's not like a societal philosophy, but I think this is going through my mind as I'm sort of getting ready to launch a project that's sort of about like encouraging people to find their creativity, which I think I really feel and I can get behind it. But that brings in this other side of like, are there some people where that encouragement would be, you know, more harmful than helpful? And like, if you can encourage it out of the brilliant artist or someone who's going to get something so valuable out of that and is going to nurture this, whatever. But you could also imagine someone throwing away like a functional life to just be like, you know what? I love that show. I'm going to go for it. And doing something irresponsible that's sort of destructive in their life or the life of others or the life of their family or the stability of their kids or whatever. So I think that's the kind of thing. That's the dynamic that is just jumbling around in my head at the moment.
Yeah, I think to me the difference is, are you encouraging? It's like if you're pushing your dream, your vision on somebody else and it doesn't fit, I think that could happen. But if it's somebody else's vision, I mean, we currently don't live in a culture, we don't have enough, there aren't enough nests for people to develop their own princeliness, their own whatever, because
but it's true that like we don't need a million princes. Idea. Prince was so amazing.
There wouldn't be a million princes. There'd still be one prince. There would still just be one prince. But if people were allowed to follow their unique path, if that kind of and that doesn't mean that that nobody has to take out the garbage. I mean, ultimately, we need to all contribute to the collective work, but um, but we also need to just support people in. I mean, I've been reading a lot of this book. I've been reading it over and over again, this Abraham Maslow Towards the Psychology of Being, which is all about that once people get their fundamental needs met, then this whole concept of self-actualization happens, where people have unique paths, where they need to follow where whatever they know where they need to go next, and everybody has a unique path. And self-actualization is not going to make everybody Prince. People self-actualize in all kinds of different directions, and the more people self-actualize in the world, the more, just the richer every town is going to be, because you're going to have self-actualized people. Prince is Prince because that's who he was.
Right,
I'm not going to be Prince.
I agree with you.
But I'm going to be something that is magnificent as well, if I can develop to the full extent.
Well, I agree with you. And don't you know people who are pretty damn self-actualized and are super annoying? Like, it's like you can't take it. Like, oh my God, this person's so I keep saying sex. This person is so self-actualized. I have to get myself away from their actualized self stat.
I don't know. Well, yeah, it'd be interesting to see an example. I would wonder. I feel like if people are annoying, it's because they really haven't found. But there's a deficiency there if they're really annoying. But
or like the super performance art side of the spectrum, like the sort of one you might mock in a movie or something, where you're just like,
yeah, I went to acting school. I went to acting school, and I had to stop acting because I couldn't stand the community and there's a certain sort of like, there's a certain theateriness that was not for me. And I think a lot of what makes those people annoying some of it's great, but overarchingly, I think that the annoying part was that these people are coming out of environments that were sort of mean to them so much, and so that now they're amongst each other, and they're just like, wah! and more power to them. And that's the other thing. It's different communities. That's, I guess, what I mean about there's Coke and Pepsi, and then if you're crazy, you drink RC. Is that actually? I mean, you're saying that there's already plenty of differentiation in the arts, and that is true. But actually, I think it's a fraction of what the human community is capable of producing. Yeah, I think that's true. And if we did, we would have a much more beautiful world.
I think that's true. Sorry. And I think it's also just a lot more rich and diverse since the internet. I mean, I think for all the terribleness that the internet has brought to us, I think one of the coolest things is you can connect to, 3.5 people that love the thing you love, and you've got a community. And actually, maybe there's more like, 3,500 or 300,000 or 3 million, but you wouldn't have ever found each other because you were stuck in this one random town where you were the only one. So that's really cool. And I think there's probably like a real, I mean, if you get into any little thing, there's people that are into any little thing, some like weird role play game, or some type of drawing, or some type of art, or some type of singing, or, type of writing or literature or fan literature. It's just like everything is out there. I don't do any of it, but I understand that it's out there, and I appreciate that it is.
And that's the beautiful thing, is that it's like we're all looking for our lunch table in the giant high school of life. And the more we get exposed to different options, the more we can say, because I can say, Tom Waits is the artist that I relate to the most. But if there were more people being freaky, I might be a little bit more refined to somebody else's camp.
Is Tom Waits a particular, or was that just an example? Is that An influence of yours?
Tom Waits is an influence of mine for sure.
I
Yeah,
mean, a North Star. Is he sort of a North Star of yours? Or however you just described it.
he's one of them. Yeah, he's one of the top. One of the top.
You can play the tarantella and the hounds will start to roar. It's great.
Nice.
I
don't like try to do his stuff, but
I didn't love his screaming into a bullhorn, but I get it. I get it. It's art. It's art. You got to do it.
Yeah, and some people really.
Some people are like, oh, I love that one in the bullhorn where, you know that one? I love that one.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, come on. There's like death metal stuff where to me it just is like, oh my God. It's
But
so
you don't listen to death metal?
No,
Freak.
I don't.
Who's the freak now?
Yeah, but that's what I mean. It's just like the more freak flag, the more communities that allow people to let their freak flag. That's I think what's needed. And
well, you've got some boundaries.
Some people
right?
should give up. Say again.
You've got some boundaries, like you probably wouldn't support the freak flag that's like racist, you know.
Oh yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah.
There's a border on how much you should let that freak flag flower.
So if I have a record company and it's just like I support everyone, and somebody comes and they're super racist or something, it's just like,
well, that's what's in your heart.
Okay, no, no, yeah, you're right. That's a tricky one, but I also believe that those people are, that's a brokenness. If you have to like be afraid of people like that and like feel so threatened that you have to hate on groups of people, then the brokenness is what needs to get addressed. And then like you find out later that like actually that they become reformed and start working for good stuff, and they also know how to paint. Who knows? I don't know. But
yeah.
Not saying those people don't need support. Ultimately, I guess what I believe is if everybody's self-actualized, I mean, this is super utopian, but then we wouldn't have these kinds of bigotries because and I think that a lot of this bigotry does come from this feeling of scarcity where people feel like, oh, there's only 6 prizes. And if we start giving some to quote unquote, those people, then there's less chances that I'm going to have. Whereas if we change the program to be like, yeah, the world is going to be richer if everybody self-actualizes, and that you actually start having this idea that it will be a good thing if everybody becomes what's inside of them, then bigotry doesn't make sense anymore. Bigotry comes from scarcity. And that's the ultimate scarcity, is this idea of only a few can succeed, and which is in evidence in our world, but should not be.
Right. Okay. Yes. I'm not sure if I make the same. I like what you're saying about scarcity. I'm not sure if I jump right from scarcity to self-actualization as the answer to scarcity, as opposed to maybe a fundamental realignment in the way the world operates. But maybe we don't have time for that one. So let's just say self-actualization will get us there. Sorry, that sounded mocking. I didn't mean it mocking.
It was mocking. No, but just to refine the point, because it's a good pushback. What I'm saying more is that what we need we need to develop more community actualization. The missing thing isn't people who want to self-actualize. Everybody wants to self-actualize, but the environment is not set up for everybody to do that. And so that's the scarcity that we can address by creating more communities that help people self-actualize. And if you're not into cooking or ASMDR or whatever that one is, it's just like, that's not going to be the community that you're going to be a part of. And that's fine, because other people can do that. But we can encourage.
But isn't Maslow, I mean, like the hierarchy of needs, right? Like the scarcity that leads to all the craziness in the world is probably much more about scarcity of basic resources, food and money and
right. And but we don't actually have that scarcities. We're enforcing that scarcity because of our economic system requires people to be desperate enough to do work that they don't want to do.
I'm on board. Now I'm on board.
But yes, but really it's just about safety. It's about belonging. Like, these are the things that a lot of people don't have time to provide for each other. And that's what's actually needed. It's not really expensive stuff beyond food and shelter. It's just like time with people to connect with people and feel a sense of belonging and safety, and that you can get sick and not be fucked. Anyway, I got a lot to say about it, but this is not the forum.
Till next time. Meet us here. High five.